Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube, and welcome to the 10,000 subscriber Q&A series. We're going to get right into the questions because we do have a lot of ground to cover. First question, Sean, what is your prognosis on the vintage Disney animated cells market that were mostly hand-drawn during the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s? The collecting category that you are referring to is Disneyana. That is actually the name. You can Google that, and you're going to get a listing of all Disney collectibles from pretty much the pre-1980s, pre-1970s, and backwards. So pretty much from the foundation of Disney all the way up through that time period, that's considered Disneyana. Yes, there is a such thing as modern era Disneyana collecting. I don't recommend it because most of that market is governed by mass-produced scarcity and a lot of mass-produced items and collectibles that have come out of Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and of course, Disney Studios over the years. So what you are referring to is the golden age of Disney. So I do want to speak to this. Again, the question asks, what is the prognosis on the vintage Disney animated cells market that were mostly hand-drawn during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s? I do like this market. This market has a lot of organic scarcity, a lot of organic demand. This is not an overhyped market. It is not like collecting animation cells from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and of the modern era that were hoarded in mass. So if you buy properly, you go after the right items, you could potentially have a good investment on your hands. Disney is not going away, guys. And I want to make that very clear. This is a prime collecting market. Is it a sophisticated market? No. Is it an established market? You can start to argue that original Disney artifacts and collectibles, again, from the golden age of Disney, are now coming into their own. So really, I would put this particular market well above that of Magic the Gathering, of Pokemon, of video games, of graded VHS movies, of Beanie Babies, Pez dispensers, all those collectibles that are extremely speculative and mass-produced. True golden age Disney is considered a much better item to put your money into over the short term and over the long term, in my opinion. If you chart the prices of some of these animation cells, and you can do that through Heritage Auctions, you don't even have to pay for an account. It's free to set up an account through Heritage. You can look at past auction history, and you will see overall the trend for these items is on the up and up. That does not mean I am telling you to invest in this market. This market does have risks. This market does have a lot of volatility that you got to take into account if you want to tie your money up in an item like this. But overall, it's relatively more stable than that of comic books, collectible card games, vintage toys, and the like. People now have been collecting Disney, original Disney memorabilia, again, known as Disneyana in the trade, for literally 70, 80 years. And I see that trend continuing. I see demand going up. I see a lot of these pieces becoming even more valuable over the future. So let that be a lesson, because Disney is part of pop culture, guys. And I want to make this very clear for those of you that think I'm not being fair, or you think I'm biased towards pop culture collectibles. Disney came out of pop culture, and it is well on its way to becoming established in the trade. So make note, it can happen. It is few and far instances and examples, but it can happen. This is one prime example. And I do want to make one more note before we go to the next question. By stating this about Disney, I am not referring to Star Wars and or Marvel Comics. Disney collectors, true Disneyana collectors, go after stuff that is related to Disney and purely Disney. They are not going after any of the collectibles that came after the acquisition of Star Wars and Marvel Comics. So keep that in mind. I know there have been a couple of threads on the CGC comic forums where collectors incorrectly assume that a lot of these prices being paid for a lot of these comic books, Star Wars items at present time is Disney collectors that are now discovering it because Disney owns the Star Wars and the Marvel film franchise. That is 100% false. Most Disneyana collectors are Disney purists. They want the golden age stuff before Disney became a thing and started buying up other companies, other licensing properties, and other franchises. And for those of you wondering, I am going to be doing a video on Disney and Disneyana collecting. It has been a long time in pre-production. I am working through it, and hopefully within the next 6 to 9 months, that video will premiere on this channel. But make no mistake, we are going to talk about Disney collecting on this channel because it's very important to denote the difference between, again, golden era Disneyana collecting and modern era Disney collecting, and what really has the value going forward over the short term or over the long term. So more on that in another video. Next question. Sean, could you kindly provide an updated view on Magic the Gathering and the reserve list as an investment? You used to refer to it as a non-credible investment. I never said that. I said it was speculative. Big difference between non-credible and speculative. But over the most recent videos, it seems to me that your perspective has slightly changed. It would be good if you could elaborate on this. Well, I'm going to do it right now for you. When we compare Magic the Gathering to that of other markets in the trade, especially when we start comparing it to certain vintage comic books, to sports cards, baseball memorabilia, all the way up to coins, currency, antique furniture, historical documents, edged weapons, firearms, high-end artwork, Magic the Gathering does not hold a candle to those markets. Magic the Gathering is extremely speculative. It is not an established market in the trade. I know a lot of the Kimmies and Poindexters go nuts when I state that. Magic the Gathering is only roughly going to be 30 years of age. It is way too new to assess the long-term validity of Magic the Gathering at present time. You guys can rip me up in the comment section. I don't care. I look at these markets for what they are from an unbiased perspective. Now, on that statement, just going off of that statement, when you compare Magic the Gathering to what's happening right now in the market for graded video games, in the market for vintage video games, even looking at what's happening with Pokemon, certain comic books at present time, what I am telling you is Magic the Gathering, as it appears from my analysis, seems to be more organic and have more organic demand than a lot of these other speculative collecting categories. So if you came to me, you put a gun to my head and said you can only choose one for long-term validity, and you said Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, or graded video games, I would choose Magic the Gathering. I really believe that Magic the Gathering is going to have a core following going forward. Now, the problem is, and this is going to be a problem for Hasbro, which owns Wizards of the Coast, in order to ensure that following continues, they're going to have to keep doing new things, make the game interesting, pull new players into the game constantly, and a lot of those players, they're going to have to want to collect a lot of the vintage cards for them to keep going up exponentially year after year. Do I think that's possible? Yes and no. No asset class can go up exponentially. I really think the people who did well in Magic the Gathering were the ones that were buying into this stuff 5, 10, 15 years ago, who held on to it, who adopted the third-party grading, who now have a lot of these valuable cards that literally just a couple of years back, you could buy for maybe low $1,000, $2,000, even PSA 10s. Now they're selling for tens of thousands of dollars. Even in some cases, obviously, when we talk about the Alpha or Beta Edition Black Lotus or some of the Power 9, they're selling for 6 figures or more. They're the people that did really well. That's why when you guys reach out to me and you try to argue with me, I'm going to become the next Rudy with Alpha Investments, you're never going to be able to replicate his success because he was buying this stuff back before a lot of these massive price increases occurred. And this is something that you have to take into account, guys. Just because you're spending right now $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on a vintage box of Magic the Gathering, and that box once sold for $500, it does not mean in that same amount of time it's now going to become a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 box of vintage Magic the Gathering cards. And this is something that you all have to realize. And that's what I try to do on this channel. This is not a hype-driven channel. I try to put everything in perspective for you. It's just like me. When I was going after a lot of rare coins that I have in my coin collection, I was not paying $10,000 for some of the coins that I have sitting in my collection that are now worth that. I was paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, maybe in certain instances $1,000. And just over time, due to demand in that market, the prices shot up. Most people would have not have been able to predict that. I was ahead of the curve because I had knowledge in that market. So yeah, if you have knowledge in these markets, you can use it to your advantage, just like I do. But what I'm going to tell you when it comes to pop culture collectibles, you are better off in most cases. If you buy something for $500 and it goes to $1,000, you are better off selling it for $1,000, taking those gains and investing it in something else and just cycling your money that way and keeping it moving. Pop culture collectibles are extremely risky and volatile over the long term. It doesn't matter what type of collecting category we are talking about. But what I will tell you is, I like Magic the Gathering a lot better than Pokemon or graded video games right now. Even comic books from the 1980s, 1990s, even some of these comic books from the 1970s, guys. Werewolf by Night 32, Tomb of Dracula 10, Giant Size X-Men 1, Incredible Hulk 181, Amazing Spider-Man 129. They have been hyped to high heaven. And I don't think these prices are sustainable long term. As a matter of fact, if you go back some of the videos that I did during the pandemic, when prices were at all-time highs, there's people coming in the comment section arguing with me that prices are going to go higher. Well, today, I'm recording this video in October 2021. Go do a price check on some of this stuff. Some of this stuff dropped 20, 30, 40% in value already. And a lot of you guys argue it's going to go back up. What is the catalyst that is going to keep occurring that's going to push this stuff higher and higher? You need more high-profile collectors coming into these markets that can afford to pay these prices continually for that to occur. In my opinion, that is not wise to bet on that continually happening. The pandemic was a once-in-a-lifetime, shot-in-the-pan thing that just sent certain collectible prices soaring. Some of them are starting to self-correct. It's just like in 2008, 2009, when the market pretty much crashed, talking about the stock market, the real estate market. If you had the money like me and you went into the market and you put money in index funds, if you put money in real estate at that particular time, even certain individual stocks that were selling at a very low price and you were able to hold it, guess what? You made a ton of money just by doing nothing. Now, here's the thing. The 2008, 2009 stock crash, that's pretty much, hopefully, a once-in-a-lifetime event. And what I mean by that is, obviously, if you were at the age where you were going to retire in 2008, 2009, and that happened, and you had a lot of your money tied up in equities, it was bad for that to happen. But for someone like me, who at that time, I think I was, gosh, we're going back 12 years. I'm going to be 45. I was 32, 33 when that happened. It was a blessing in disguise. Let's be realistic, because I had the means. I wasn't near retirement by no means, but I had the money and the means to go after those undervalued securities. Do you see the similarities and the differences to Wall Street, to overall investing and how it impacts the collectibles market? I've done videos on this, guys. Next question. Sean, could you provide actual concrete definitions on what is for you a sophisticated investor, a Timmy, and or a Poindexter? This is not a troll question. These terms are usually thrown around casually by not only you, but several people without a proper definition. And it would be useful, especially for non-English natives like me, to have an actual definition. Okay. A Timmy and a Kimmy is pretty much a male or a female who has no idea what they're doing. They're getting involved in these markets and they're pretty much buying stuff. And in my opinion, they're quote unquote blue-pilled. They look at the collectibles market. They fall for a lot of these hype-driven channels, a lot of these hype-driven online collecting forums that tell you collectibles do nothing but go up in value. And compared to Wall Street, they're better investments. That's what a lot of these hype-driven channels put out. They don't put out a lot of responsibility, in my opinion. So a Kimmy or a Timmy is a male or female who falls for the hype, doesn't understand finance, doesn't understand business, and honestly, doesn't even understand how the antiques and collectibles trade truly works over the short term and or over the long term. Now, a sophisticated investor is someone who is most likely educated, both in business, economics, and finance, and also comes into these markets, may have an emotional attachment, and also realizes that, okay, how does me tying up $100,000 in Pokemon cards compare to me putting $100,000 in an S&P 500 index fund or $100,000 in a real estate investment property or $100,000 in a corporate bond or an individual stock or in gold, whatever investment he's looking at. He understands opportunity costs. He understands how all these markets work over the short term and over the long term. And he understands the level of risk that he is taking. And this is something I am going to quote other YouTubers here because I agree with this analysis. A sophisticated investor looks at how much money he can lose. A Timmy, a Kimmy, somebody of that nature, they only look at how much money they can make. And that's why in the year 2021, if you do an analysis of wealth inequality, at least in the United States, you're going to find out why a lot of people, if they have to come up with just $400 for an unplanned expense, they can't do it without selling an item or putting it on a credit card because they are not financially educated. And a lot of people ask me, well, Sean, who do you blame for that? That's a question beyond discussion on this channel. If you guys want me to answer that, I will. Let me know in the comment section and we'll talk about that again in another video. But just to make this particular answer brief, that's pretty much the difference between a sophisticated investor and that of a Timmy or a Kimmy. Now, a Poindexter was first phrased by one of my mentors in the trade who noticed that in the collecting category that he was operating in, there were a lot of people just jumping on the bandwagon and they were collecting it because it was going to be the quote-unquote next big thing. If you want a prime example over this, if you look back 2010, 2012, 2013, when YouTube started to become a thing, there were a lot of people jumping on the retro video game bandwagon. You can go back, you can watch videos where people have shelves behind them full of loose Nintendo cartridges, Super Nintendo games, Sega Genesis, Saturn, whatever their passion was. And what's really interesting, a lot of those guys went on eBay and they bidded up a lot of these games. They completed their collection in record time. And then what happened? Literally a year or two goes by and they sell it all off. Why is that? Because number one, they don't have the collecting gene. That's why they're in that particular predicament. And number two, it was something that they completed really quickly because everybody else was doing it. So they pretty much watched other YouTubers, watched other collectors out there, go to eBay, fill up their house with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis games, and they said, hey, that looks like a neat thing to do. I remember playing those games when I was a kid. So that's what they did. They're bandwagon jumpers. And every collecting category out there, from rare coins to high-end art to Pokemon cards to video games to Pez dispenser collecting to vintage toy collecting to comic book collecting, it doesn't matter the collecting category. There's a lot of Poindexters in these markets that think they know what they're doing. Maybe they think, hey, I do have the collecting gene. Then they get into it, they get burned out, and they realize, hey, I just tied up $10,000 of my money in something I'm no longer really interested in. And they end up selling it off. That's the definition of a Poindexter. Then I gave you the definition of a Timmy and a Kimmy and compared that to a sophisticated investor. So I hope that clarifies. Again, Sophisticated investors understand time value of money. They understand opportunity cost. They understand the cost of borrowing money, and they understand the cost analysis of that investment versus other investments that they could basically take by utilizing that same amount of money. And that's how you really have to analyze these markets. You cannot get emotionally attached. You can't come into these markets with a credit card. You can't come into these markets with inheritance and think you're going to make it. The antiques and collectibles trade, by and large, is a very niche market. It's very nuanced and it's very complex. And this is something that I run into a lot with a lot of these collecting forums. You know, right now, go on any collecting forum, go on any of your pop culture collecting forums and just search for reserved investments. And you are going to get a plethora, in most cases, not in all, in most cases, you're going to get a plethora of people commenting on my videos. And most of these people, I'm going to state it, there are some good comments, don't get me wrong, even critical comments. I will concede there are some good critical comments against the material that I produce. But by and large, most of the people that comment negatively on my videos, they are Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters. They do not know what they're doing. They're most likely in their 20s or 30s. They just discovered these markets. They think just because they grew up with Pokemon, Pokemon's going to go to the moon, and anything that Nintendo or Pokemon produces is going to be valuable because some other collector that wasn't even born yet is going to want to collect that stuff and want to keep buying into it over and over, rising the price exponentially. That is not how these markets work over the long term. That is a recipe for disaster. I personally know collectors who have gone bankrupt following that advice. That's why when you guys are told, stay the course in any other financial asset or even real estate, if you're given that advice, and as long as you're not investing in stupid penny stocks or something unproven, I would tell you you're absolutely right. If you want to stay the course, investing in an S&P 500 index fund, that would be wise. If you want to stay the course, investing in real estate, rental properties, that would be wise. If you want to stay the course, investing in total stock market index fund, or even some of these other index funds that track different indexes overall that are linked to financial assets, that's great advice. In the collectibles market, staying the course over the long term in most of these markets is horrible advice. It's going to cost you a fortune. It's going to cost you your livelihood. Unless if you are one of the top 3 to 5% of all these collectors that know how to pull the strings in these markets. And that is what I preach on this channel. Common sense. Are there people out there that will profit in the collectibles markets from staying the course? Yes, because they have assets in other asset classes outside of collectibles. Meaning they probably own real estate, they probably own corporate bonds, stocks, mutual funds. They have their money spread around evenly. And unfortunately, what we have today in the year 2021, little Timmy logs on to YouTube. What does he log on to? He either logs on to toxic red pill advice for his dating life, or little Timmy logs into a lot of the hype-driven YouTube channels that tell him, hey, you can put all your money in Pokemon Magic. It's just going to keep going up. Don't let that guy Sean on Reserved Investments tell you otherwise. Don't let any of these other people talk any sense into you. You're a quote-unquote alpha male. Yeah, you don't have to go to college. You're the prize, dude. You just put all your money in the Magic the Gathering Pokemon. Everyone's going to love you just for who you are. I'm sorry, guys. The world does not work that way. If you seriously think that is valid advice and you're going to actually make something of yourself doing that, you are delusional. You are suffering from a Ponzi dream. Not a Ponzi scheme, a Ponzi dream. Next question. Sean, questions regarding NFTs. For those that don't know what an NFT is, non-fungible token. I think I even pronounced that wrong. Sorry, guys. I'm doing my best here. I'm in my mid-30s and feel like a boomer in regards to these since I don't participate. Okay, that's another conversation we need to have. You know, guys, I started getting interesting comments on this channel. And some of you out there, I don't think you understand that I'm going to be 45 years of age this December. That does not make me a baby boomer. I have no idea where you're getting this information. I'm a Gen Xer. Even millennials. There are certain millennials now that are just approaching 40 years of age. For me to be a baby boomer, I would literally have to be almost in my mid to late 60s. I just want to make that very clear. So at the age of 45, I am nowhere near being a baby boomer. I'm like 20 years off. And those of you that tell me I don't even look 45, you got your answer there, okay? So back to your question. I feel like a boomer in regards to these since I don't participate. Okay, I can tell you this when I talk to baby boomers who are also collectors, who are also investors in these markets, I can tell you firsthand, there actually are some baby boomers that do like NFTs. And again, these people are in their mid-60s on up. So there are some that do like NFTs. But I do want to answer your questions in full. Sean, can you put into your perspective the bull and bear cases for NFT collecting becoming mainstream based on historical examples or analogs? Okay, I do think the technology behind both cryptocurrency and NFTs, known as blockchain technology, is here to stay. That's not a fad. The problem that I have with cryptocurrency is, I'm going to start there, then I'll get to NFTs. Cryptocurrency reminds me what was happening in the 1990s with dot-com stocks. If we go back to the 1990s, there were all sorts of crazy people putting their money in pets.com or eToys or gardens.com, thinking just because it had .com after it meant it was going to become a profitable enterprise. Now, to be fair, and I want to be fair here, if you could go back in the 1990s and you could buy Amazon stock or eBay stock or PayPal stock, there's no question you did very well. But those were the exceptions, not the norm. In 2021, does anybody think Time Warner is as valuable as it is or was back in the 1990s with the launch of AOL? If you remember, AOL and Time Warner merged, and they formed a very profitable enterprise during that particular time. Today, in the year 2021, Time Warner, AOL, it's not really relevant. So what I am telling you guys, when I tell you that the reason why I don't invest in cryptocurrency is because it's too speculative. I'm not stating that cryptocurrency is going to go away. What I am stating, quite simply, is that in 2041, I don't think Dogecoin, Bitcoin, Litecoin, all the other ones are still going to be relevant. Meaning at some point, I honestly do think they're going to go to zero and certain new coins are going to come out that are going to replace them. That's why when somebody tells you that cryptocurrency is like .com stocks, guess what? They're 100% correct, because the analogy can be seen there. Just like in 2021, nobody's using dial-up AOL anymore. Nobody's logging on to pets.com, even though the little sock puppet guy was pretty cool. I mean, I give him that. That was a cool marketing gimmick. eToys went bankrupt. Why did that happen? Because those companies didn't turn a profit. They were too speculative. The same thing is happening with Bitcoin and a lot of these cryptocurrencies. When was the last time you saw somebody purchase something with Bitcoin? I'll wait. Very few people use Bitcoin or cryptocurrency to purchase something. It's a speculative vehicle they want to own because they think more people come in and buy it, the price goes up, which is true. That's why there's a lot of people manipulating that market right now. Remember, market for cryptocurrency is completely unregulated. Now, what does this have to do with NFTs? I do believe that a lot of companies like Lego, even Nintendo, Hasbro that owns Wizards of the Coast, Pokemon, they're going to hop on board on this type of technology, and they're going to use it because they don't have to create physical products. So I think they're going to use this technology in addition to obviously releasing physical products, because we both know at present time, the physical versions of Pokemon, the physical versions of Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, they're not going away. Lego's not going to stop producing plastic toy bricks anytime soon. But what most likely could happen is these companies can look at that technology and they could go, hey, we can put out a gimmick or a mass-produced scarce item utilizing NFT technology, we don't have to produce anything, and we can sell it to the masses, and maybe they'll try to collect it. We just got to see what happens to see if it catches on. So that's where I see NFT collecting going. It's going to be most likely in addition to physical products. What scares me is when I see artists like Beeple utilizing nothing but NFT technology, and that stuff hitting the market, selling for tens of millions of dollars. That's where I pull back and say, okay, we got to get back to basics here. There should be something physical if you're going to be spending that type of money on something, in my opinion. So that's where I draw caution. I hope that you can see from that analogy how I'm answering your question. What does the future look like to you? Honestly, I hope we don't ever enter an all-digital future, both when it comes to currency, both when it comes to collectibles. Could that happen? Yes, younger generations are going to determine that. It's not going to be determined by baby boomers. It's not going to be determined by Gen Xers like me. It's not going to be determined by millennials. It would be literally Generation Y, Generation Z that would pretty much determine where we go in that direction. And that's going to take many, many years for us to have a gauge. Okay, what are Gen Zers collecting? What are they buying? What are they gravitating towards? And as soon as that trend becomes known, that's how we'll see where it's going to go. Your final question is, how are you personally preparing or not preparing for NFT adoption? Honestly, at present time, I'm just taking a wait-and-see attitude. Same thing I'm doing with cryptocurrency. It's not something for me that I want to get involved in at the age of 45. Again, if you're 25, you have your proverbial shit together, you already have a college degree, you're making bank, you want to devote a little bit of your money to these particular speculative assets at present time, I don't have a problem with that. You're not hurting anything as long as you're not hurting yourself financially going forward into the future. But what I will tell you is at 45, I'm at a different position, guys. That's why I'm cautious on a lot of these markets. I have more of a conservative pull to a lot of these more speculative markets in the trade because, again, I'm in my 40s. The problem that I have with a lot of you guys in your 20s putting the ton of money that you are putting in these markets is you're not financially established yet. It's very easy if you have a YouTube channel or even if you post comments on message boards, forums, and the like. When I get a view of your lifestyle, most of you guys are not making six figures. You're not at a point where you've paid off your college debt. You have no car loans, no credit card debt. Your mortgage is taken care of. A lot of you guys are playing with money you don't have, hoping to make money that may never come. And that is a problem that I have with the younger generations. And this goes back to the question at the beginning of this video, why can't the average person in America afford a $400 expense without having to sell something or without having to put it on their credit card? It comes down to financial illiteracy, meaning people are not educated in business, economics, finance. They come into these markets and they don't realize that the fundamentals and the dynamics that make up the antiques and collectibles trade are unregulated, number one, and they're directly linked to Wall Street. A lot of the top minds in Wall Street already penetrated the antiques and collectibles trade and are making bank at the Timmy's, Kimmy's, and Poindexter's expense. I am sorry to end this particular edition of the 10,000 subscriber Q&A series on a sour note, but that's literally how I'm going to end it because it's a good stopping point. So I hope you got something out of this. If you did not, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.